She stood in court and said, "I killed them, and I'd do it again." The room froze. Aileen Wuornos, a homeless drifter turned death row inmate, would become one of the most widely known female serial offenders in U.S. history. But here's the question that still divides America. Was she a cold-blooded killer, or a deeply damaged woman who believed she was fighting to survive? This is the case that forced the justice system to confront criminal psychology, trauma, and the ultimate punishment, the death penalty. The day she spoke in court, the room went silent. "I killed those men," she said calmly, "and I would do it again." Reporters froze. Cameras clicked. The judge stared at her without moving. This was not a whisper. It was not a tearful confession. It was direct, clear, final. The woman standing there was Aileen Wuornos, and within months, she would become one of the most widely known female serial offenders in American history. But what led her to this moment? And what was happening inside her mind? Before the headlines, before the trial, before death row, there was a child. Eileen Carol Pittman was born in 1956 in Michigan. Her life began in chaos. Her parents separated before she was even born. Her father was later diagnosed with serious mental health problems and spent time in prison before taking his own life. Eileen never really knew him. She and her brother were raised by their grandparents. The home was strict. Some reports later described it as unstable. By her early teens, Eileen was already struggling. She dropped out of school. She lived in the woods for a time. She survived by doing odd jobs and sometimes exchanging sex for money. She was still just a teenager. Life did not get easier. As she grew older, Eileen drifted across states. She was arrested multiple times for small crimes, theft, fraud, and other non-violent offenses. She struggled with homelessness. She struggled with anger. She struggled with trust. In 1986, she met a woman named Tyria Moore in Florida. The two began a relationship. For a while, Eileen seemed happy. She spoke about wanting stability, about wanting love, about wanting to belong somewhere. But beneath the surface, pressure was building. Money was tight. Work was unstable. Eileen continued engaging in sex work along Florida highways. And then, in 1989, everything changed. The first victim was found in December 1989 in Central Florida. He had been reported missing. His abandoned car was later discovered in another county. Police noticed something unusual. This was not random. This was personal. Over the next year, several men were found dead in different parts of Florida. All were middle-aged. All had been traveling alone. Many had last been seen picking up a woman along the highway. Investigators began connecting the dots. The pattern became clear. The media picked up the story quickly. Headlines described a rare and shocking possibility: a woman targeting men. A female serial killer case. That alone stunned the public. Statistically, most serial offenders are male. Female serial offenders are far less common. And when they do appear, their crimes often look different, sometimes involving poison or people they know. But this case didn't fit that pattern. This case felt different. By 1990, law enforcement launched a statewide search. Witness sketches were released. Pawnshop records were reviewed. Fingerprints were analyzed. Then came a major break. Police traced one victim's stolen belongings to a pawnshop. The receipt led them to a name: Aileen Wuornos. Detectives moved fast. In January 1991, they arrested her at a motorcycle bar in Florida. She did not resist. At first, she denied everything. Then, something shifted. In a series of taped confessions, Eileen admitted to killing the men. But she told a very different story. She claimed self-defense. She said the men attacked her. She said she feared for her life. She said she acted to survive. The interviews were intense. She spoke quickly, sometimes calmly, sometimes angrily. At moments, she seemed clear and focused. At others, she appeared paranoid. Investigators now faced a complicated question. Was this calculated murder, or were these acts of self-defense and dangerous encounters? The difference would decide everything. The state charged her with multiple counts of murder. Each case would be tried separately. The first trial began in early 1992. The courtroom was packed. The prosecution presented evidence linking Eileen to the crime scenes. Ballistics reports matched the weapon. Witnesses described seeing her with some of the victims. The defense focused on her past. They described years of abuse, years of trauma, a lifetime of instability. They argued that Aileen had reason to fear violent men. Mental health experts were called to evaluate her. Psychologists testified about personality disorders, about possible antisocial traits, about emotional trauma from childhood. The jury listened carefully. They had to answer a difficult question. Was Aileen Wuornos a cold-blooded killer, or a deeply damaged woman reacting in fear? After deliberation, the jury found her guilty. The judge sentenced her to death. She showed little emotion. Over the next few years, she was tried in additional cases. Each time, similar outcomes followed: guilty verdicts, death sentences. She was sent to Florida's death row for women. A death row woman, one of the most high-profile in the country. While waiting for execution, Aileen gave interviews. Some were calm, some were erratic. She accused police of conspiracy. She claimed mistreatment. She spoke about paranoia. She spoke about hatred. Mental health debates intensified. Some experts argued she suffered from severe personality disorders. Others believed she understood her actions fully. The legal system had already ruled her competent to stand trial, but public opinion remained divided. The case forced America to confront uncomfortable questions. How do we judge someone with a traumatic past? How do we separate explanation from excuse? Does mental illness reduce responsibility? And when the death penalty is involved, how certain must we be? Her appeals continued for years. Then, in 2002, something unexpected happened. Aileen asked to stop her appeals. She told the court she did not want to delay execution any longer. Some supporters were shocked. They believed she was not mentally stable enough to make that decision. But the court reviewed her request. Psychiatric evaluations once again examined her state of mind. Doctors determined she was legally competent. The execution date was set. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in Florida. She was 46 years old. Her final words were reported by witnesses. The case officially closed, but the debate did not. In the years that followed, documentaries were made, books were written, films were produced. Psychologists studied her case in classrooms. Law students debated her sentencing. Her story became more than a crime headline. It became a case study in criminal psychology, a rare female serial offender, a death penalty trial, a question of mental health and responsibility. But even today, one question lingers. When Aileen Wuornos said she acted in self-defense, was there any evidence that supported her claims? Because buried inside the trial records, hidden within investigative files, was one detail that many people missed. A detail that could change how you see the entire case. The trial was over. The sentence was final. But the questions were just beginning. Inside a quiet room far from the courtroom, boxes of files sat untouched for years. Police reports, psychiatric evaluations, interview transcripts, evidence logs, pages filled with words that never made headlines. This was the part of the story few people talked about. This was the part about her mind. After Aileen Wuornos was sentenced to death, the public image of her became fixed. A monster, a villain, a rare female serial killer who showed no remorse. But criminal psychologists who studied her case saw something more complex. They saw contradictions. They saw trauma layered on trauma, and they saw warning signs that began long before the first crime. Aileen's childhood records painted a disturbing picture. Teachers had reported behavioral issues early on. She was aggressive, isolated, quick to anger. She struggled to form healthy relationships. Psychologists later noted that her development showed signs of early emotional neglect. Her upbringing lacked stability, safety, and trust. By her teenage years, survival became her priority. Food, shelter, protection, every interaction felt like a threat. This mattered because long-term trauma changes how the brain works. It alters how danger is perceived. It rewires fear. Experts later explained that people with severe childhood trauma often live in a constant state of alert. Their brains prepare for attack, even when none is coming. For Aileen, fear wasn't occasional, it was permanent. When psychologists evaluated her after arrest, they found several troubling traits. She showed signs of borderline personality disorder, paranoid thinking, extreme emotional reactions, a deep fear of abandonment. She also showed antisocial behaviors, impulsivity, difficulty following social rules, and a lack of trust in authority. But there was disagreement. Some experts believed she exaggerated symptoms. Others believed she genuinely believed the world was out to harm her. The most important question was this: did she understand right from wrong? Legally, the answer was yes. She knew killing was illegal. She knew her actions had consequences. That made her eligible for the death penalty. But understanding the law is not the same as understanding fear. During police interviews, Aileen described the killings in disturbing detail, but her explanations were consistent. She said the men attacked her. She said they threatened her. She said she believed she would be killed. Investigators challenged her story. In some cases, evidence showed the victims were shot at close range. In others, the scene suggested the men were taken by surprise. There were no witnesses, no cameras, only her word, and her word was already damaged by her past and her anger. Prosecutors argued her claims of self-defense were false. They said she robbed the victims. They said the killings were planned. They said fear was an excuse. The jury agreed. But years later, independent analysts reviewed the evidence again. They noticed something strange. In several cases, there were signs of struggle, disrupted clothing, defensive injuries on Aileen, but these details were downplayed. The prosecution focused on patterns, not moments. They needed to prove intent, and patterns are powerful in court. Another key figure in the case was Tyria Moore, Aileen's partner. Investigators pressured Tyria to cooperate. They told her she could face charges. They told her she could lose everything. Eventually, Tyria agreed to help. She recorded phone calls with Aileen. In those calls, Aileen made damaging statements. Some sounded like confessions. Others sounded confused. Some experts later argued that Aileen was manipulated, that she trusted Tyria completely, that she said what she thought Tyria wanted to hear. Those recordings became crucial evidence. Without them, the case would have looked very different. As appeals continued, Aileen's mental state worsened. Prison psychologists reported increasing paranoia. She believed guards were poisoning her food. She believed the courts were part of a conspiracy. She believed she was already dead. Her behavior raised serious concerns. Was she truly competent? Or was she deteriorating? The courts ordered new evaluations. Once again, doctors concluded she understood her situation, but they also noted severe mental instability. The legal system faced a hard truth. The law does not require mental wellness, only legal awareness. Public opinion shifted over time. Some people remained firm. She deserved the sentence. Others began to question it. Advocacy groups argued her trauma was never fully considered. They argued that executing someone with severe mental illness crossed a moral line. But the appeals clock kept ticking. And then, Aileen made a choice that shocked everyone. She asked to die. In 2001, she formally requested to stop all appeals. She said she was tired. She said she was ready. She said she did not trust the system. Some believed this was her final act of control. Others believed it was despair. Psychologists debated whether this decision was rational, but legally it was allowed. The state accepted her request. The execution date was set. In her final interviews, Aileen was calmer, but not peaceful. She spoke about betrayal. She spoke about being used. She spoke about being misunderstood. And she spoke about something else. A memory. One moment from one crime. A detail she had never shared before. She claimed one victim laughed while threatening her. She claimed she saw death in his eyes. No one could confirm it. No one could deny it. Because that moment existed only in her mind. As the execution approached, the world watched. Some with anger. Some with sadness. Some with uncertainty. The system moved forward. And when it was over, the case was officially closed. But one question refused to die. If trauma shaped her fear, if fear shaped her actions, then where does justice end and responsibility begin? The execution room was quiet. Bright lights. Witnesses seated behind glass. A clock on the wall that no one could ignore. Aileen Wuornos lay strapped to a narrow bed in a Florida prison. Her arms were secured. Medical staff moved carefully, professionally. There were no raised voices, no chaos, just procedure. At 9:47 a.m. on October 9, 2002, the sentence was carried out. She was 46 years old. Just like that, the legal case ended. But the debate had only begun. In the days after her execution, news outlets across the country revisited her story. Some focused on the crimes, others focused on her past. Many asked the same question: was justice served? Or did the system fail to understand the full picture? Aileen Wuornos became more than a headline. She became a symbol in discussions about criminal psychology, trauma, and capital punishment. Her case forced people to confront something uncomfortable. Most serial offenders in U.S. history have been men. Female serial offenders are statistically rare. That alone made her case stand out. But it was not just her gender. It was the combination of violence, trauma, mental health, and the death penalty. Criminal psychologists studied her interviews for years. They looked at her body language, her tone of voice, her shifting emotions. At times, she appeared calm and aware. At other times, her thinking seemed disorganized and paranoid. Experts asked, was this a calculated offender, or someone shaped by years of instability and fear? The answer was never simple. In classrooms across America, law students began studying her capital punishment trial. They examined how juries weigh aggravating factors against mitigating factors. Aggravating factors are details that make a crime more severe. Mitigating factors are details that explain a person's background, trauma, or mental state. In Aileen's case, the prosecution emphasized the pattern: multiple victims over time. The defense emphasized her childhood, her homelessness, her documented mental health disorders. The jury had to decide which weighed more heavily. They chose death. But public opinion shifted over the years. Some people remained firm. The crimes were serious. The sentence was lawful. Others began to question whether the death penalty should apply in cases involving severe mental instability. Her case became part of a larger national debate. Should trauma reduce punishment? Should mental illness protect someone from execution? Where is the line between understanding and accountability? These questions did not begin with Aileen Wuornos, but her case made them louder. Meanwhile, documentaries and books explored her life in depth. Some portrayed her as purely dangerous. Others portrayed her as deeply damaged. But the truth lives somewhere between extremes. She was not a myth. She was not a monster from fiction. She was a real person shaped by real experiences. And she made real choices that led to irreversible consequences. In Florida, the legal system followed procedure. Multiple mental health evaluations determined she was competent. Her decision to stop appeals was reviewed carefully. No evidence showed she lacked legal awareness at the time of execution. From a legal standpoint, the process was completed properly. From a human standpoint, the questions remain open. Today, criminal psychology experts use her case as a study in complexity. They examine how trauma affects brain development, how fear can distort perception, how unstable attachment in childhood can shape adult behavior. But they also emphasize something important. Trauma explains behavior. It does not automatically excuse it. That balance between explanation and responsibility is one of the hardest parts of justice. Her story also reshaped how people view female offenders. Before her case, many believed women rarely committed serial crimes. Statistics still show they are less common than male offenders, but her case proved they exist, and it challenged stereotypes about how and why crimes happen. It reminded investigators not to rely only on assumptions. Profiling must be based on evidence, not expectations. Years later, when people search for her name, they often expect a simple answer. Was she evil? Was she a victim? The truth is more complicated. She was a woman with a history of abuse, a woman who committed serious crimes, a woman sentenced to death after a capital punishment trial, a woman whose mental health evaluations became part of national discussion. Her case still appears in debates about solitary confinement, trauma, rehabilitation, and sentencing outcomes. It still appears in textbooks. it still appears in documentaries, not because it is shocking, but because it forces society to ask difficult questions. In the end, Aileen Wuornos left behind more than court transcripts. She left behind a case study, a warning, a lesson about how early trauma can ripple across decades, a reminder that criminal psychology is not simple, and a challenge to the justice system. How do we judge someone fully? Do we judge only the act, or the life that led to it? The courtroom where she once stood is now quiet. The prison where she was held continues its routine with other inmates. Time moves forward, but the case remains frozen in history. A rare female serial killer case, a death row woman whose story shaped conversations about mental health and capital punishment, and a reminder that behind every headline is a complicated human story. The sentence was carried out. The files were closed, but the debate she left behind still lives on in courtrooms, in classrooms, and in every discussion about justice, psychology, and the power of the human mind. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe for more crime documentary